With a 50% obesity rate in the U.S. and more unhealthy people than ever before, it is time to make America healthy. Welcome to Make America Healthy with Beth Shaw. If you're feeling tired, toxic, heavy, slow, or stressed, then keep listening. Beth and her expert guests are here to offer practical advice and share the tools you need to reclaim your physical, mental, and emotional health. Now, here is your host, Beth Shaw.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Make America Healthy, where our goal is to empower you with as much knowledge and information as possible so that you can make healthier choices for your physical and your mental health, because we want you to be in charge, and we know that you're your best advocate always. My name is Beth Shaw, and I'm the founder of Yoga Fit Training Systems, the author of 4 books on health and wellness, the host of this show, obviously, and I do a lot of public speaking and working with corporate executives for corporate wellness. So welcome to the show. Today, it's all about the microbiome. So if you were ever wondering what's going on with your gut, perhaps why it's not working that well, or things you can do to improve the health of your digestion and digestive function, you're in for a special treat because we are with Dr. Shaina Cahill, who is the Director of Medical Communications and Affairs at Microbiome, where she looks to expand public awareness of the safety and efficacy of FMT, the importance of the gut microbiome, and she is very passionate about medical education and alternative medicines. Yay, alternative medicines. She has got a PhD in neuroscience from the University of British Columbia and has published several research papers on many topics, including the gut-brain connection. So without further ado, Dr. Cahill, what is this microbiome? We've only been hearing about it for maybe the past 10, 15 years, and it seems to be all the rage. Can you educate both myself and our listeners on what the microbiome is to get started?
Yeah, so I'm going to focus in on the gut microbiome. So the microbiome, it's on your skin, it's in your mouth. It's literally, you have a version of the microbiome from your head to your toes, but the one that research has really honed in on, and it seems to have these like really widespread effects to overall health, is the gut microbiome. And the gut microbiome includes kind of everything that you think about when you think about digestion, from eating all the way through, but it's mostly contains the small and large intestines, and has a lot of different bacteria and different viruses and stuff that live in your gut that are meant to be there to kind of help support overall health. And when we're talking about what's in there, there's, over 100 trillion different types of bacteria that sit in your gut. And they've been linked to a lot of acute and chronic conditions, as well as just general overall health and well-being. And so when we think about what roles it plays, it goes from kind of protecting your body from pathogens, metabolism and breaking down and storing different fats, production of things like essential vitamins and neurotransmitters that play a big role in your brain, and modulating your immune system. So your gut kind of is able to modulate different systems in your body. And so it plays a really big and kind of exciting role as we learn more about it.
So we've had a digestive expert. Actually, I'm seeing her in her practice now. Her name is Dr. Diana DeGrossa from Bright Path Wellness. And I'm wondering, I know that people are doing all kinds of things for their microbiome now. How hard is it to change your microbiome, let's say from, I don't want to just use the terms bad and good, but let's say from less effective to more effective? Is that possible? Are different supplements that people should take, different protocols, obviously a different eating program for some people, like with all these different, thousands of different pathogens in our system, as well as good bacteria, bad bacteria. Like, how will people know if, other than taking a test, which I actually did about 2 weeks ago, I'm waiting for the results, but how will people know if they've got a good microbiome or a challenged one? Let's say that.
Yeah. So I think the best way to start is we know a lot about what can can shift the gut microbiome into a dysfunctional state, is what we consider it. So we know things like taking different medications. So like if you take antibiotics and you've had to take them a lot, what happens when you take antibiotics? It kind of just kills all the bacteria in your gut. It wipes out the system that exists there. So we know that different medications, as well as things like proton pump inhibitors and SSRIs, even taking laxatives, can affect your gut microbiome. So being aware of the medications that you're taking, and then being aware of steps you can take to kind of rebuild your gut after taking those or while you're taking them. Diet plays a huge role. So diets that are high in sugars, high in processed foods, as well as really low in fiber, are known to negatively impact the gut microbiome. The beauty of diet is its ability to change the gut microbiome. So we have seen in the research that the gut microbiome can shift to a more positive state within 24 hours of shifting your diet. And the longer that you shift the diet, kind of the more you're able to shift your gut microbiome into kind of a happier state. So when we think about like, what can I do to eat better to then make my gut happier? The way we think about it is you want a really diverse bacterial makeup in your gut. The way to do that is the more diverse your diet, the more diverse the bacteria. So one of the things that we tell people is every week, try to eat 50 different foods. Be that different greens, different vegetables, different meats, different types of protein sources. Try to encompass 50 different foods. By that, that means you're feeding your body a diverse diet. Another big one is the importance of fiber in your diet. And the more I read about this, the more I realize like you can't understate how important dietary fiber is. And that ranges from not only just the role that we know fiber plays in kind of helping our body kind of cleanse itself and get things out of our body. It also plays a big role in different building blocks and how the body is able to function more effectively and what the gut can do, be that the stability of your gut, but as well as it helps helps it do the role it's supposed to do. So the more fiber you have, the better kind of rounded your diet is. Another big one that everybody talks about is physical exercise. In general, we know exercise is good for us. We know it across the board. We can no longer deny that exercise is good. And we know that it plays a really big role both in brain health and gut health, but as well as the health of the gut-brain connection. But I always try to explain to people, when you start the role of how to tackle adding physical exercise in, it can start really small. Take the stairs instead of the elevator, stand for 10 minutes every hour. And so adding those things in, that's the beginning of the building blocks, but that physical activity does shift your gut health. So, diet and exercise really can improve health everywhere, but those are modulating things that can start small and you continue to build on that change, and that continues to build on gut health. Smoking and excessive drinking is really bad for your gut, but as well as being aware of what kind of environmental toxins you're exposed to. So pesticides, heavy metals, and molds play a really big role in gut health as well. And those are things that you can change. And then of course, there's always the ones like, excessive stress and poor sleep are really bad for your gut. But those are hard things to, you can't look at someone and go, be less stressed. That doesn't make them less stressed. But one thing, when you add physical exercise in, when you change your diet, that changes the gut makeup. But we also see that helps with reductions in stress. It helps with improvements in sleep, and as well as improvements in mood. And that kind of all goes together. And that's one of the fun things about gut health, is we know they impact, mood, stress, and sleep, but it's not that it's just your gut health. It's changing your gut, changes your brain health, which then can, change your overall health.
It's so interesting. I read a book years ago called The Second Brain, and they talked about how much serotonin was released in the gut, more actually, I think, than in the brain. And for people, who are listening to this, who perhaps don't like to move their bodies or don't want to exercise, this is one more case. A doctor recommended that you should be exercising your body every day, because obviously it's good for mood, it's good for weight management, but now we're hearing it's good for your digestion and good for your microbiome.
Yeah. And it's little things. I mean, I studied exercise for a long time in my academic career. And it's not, you don't have to go running, and you don't have to go lift weights. That's not where exercise has to start. Walking a little more every day and choosing to walk when you can, that's the beginning. And that's the beginning of really good exercise routines, and ones that you can keep up, and adding that in and extending that is the building blocks to adding physical activity into, everyday life.
So there are a lot of tests right now. I know because I just did one for the microbiome. Who would you recommend should get their microbiome tested?
I feel like if you're looking at like, what's the best diet for me, or if you feel really bloated all the time, or you're really constipated and those kinds of things, by having your gut microbiome tested, a lot of these companies, what they'll do is when they evaluate them is they'll give you an idea of changes you can make that help balance that bacteria or best enhance the good bacteria you have. So, I mean, if you want to make a shift, if you feel like when you're eating food, you feel like it's not doing what you need it to do, it's not giving you the energy you need, or if you feel really bloated all the time, like those are good reasons to get an idea of what your gut is doing that maybe isn't fitting your lifestyle. And then they often suggest, changes that you can make to best optimize the gut that you have and shift it into a more healthy state.
And what are your thoughts on things like I start every morning with 1 to 3 probiotics? Sometimes I'll have some kimchi or some sauerkraut, fermented vegetables. Sometimes I'll do the apple cider vinegar in water. I don't necessarily have a consistent routine, but the probiotics are consistent. I'm wondering what your thoughts are, because there's so many different probiotics on the market. That's why I try to mix it up a little bit. Like, how do we know if those probiotics are working? And then also, what are your thoughts on prebiotics? And can you educate our listeners on the difference between a prebiotic and a probiotic?
Yeah. So across the board, these pre and probiotics, what we understand of them is they're effective while you're taking them. So they do add to your gut makeup, and they are really useful. They do make significant changes while they're being taken. The downside with them is when you stop taking them, they don't actually engraft, or they actually don't take up host in your gut. So once you stop taking them, the benefits that you were seeing are often mostly or completely lost. So that's kind of the downside with these, is that they're really useful. You have to consistently take them. So that's one of the benefits of kind of getting an understanding of your gut microbiome as a whole, and how you can make kind of lifestyle changes like diet that then can kind of actually change the makeup, versus adding something in it's only going to be there while you take it. So it's kind of, it can get expensive, and it can be really difficult, because if you have to come off the probiotics, the benefits you were seeing are lost. And that's something we can consider them a transient benefit. So they don't stay once you stop taking them, versus something like when you get like fecal microbiota transplantation done, which is, taking someone else's microbiome.
Is that FMT, by the way?
Yes. So FMT.
Yeah, I was wondering what I thought it was that.
Yeah. And so what you're doing there is it's a purified form of someone else's gut microbiome. And we know that engrafts. So that's kind of a permanent change, and used for if your gut is dysfunctional to a point where you can't bring it back. But these changes that I talked about before, like with diet and exercise and being aware of your environment, those are changes you can make that can then help shift your gut into kind of a healthier state. But, probiotics are really useful. Fermented foods are really great. That's a good additive to your diet, as well as like plant-based proteins and whole foods are really important, because they create building blocks to kind of enhance gut health.
Right. And you mentioned, eat 50 different foods every week. I think, and many of the people who are listening are in the fitness industry. We kind of tend to eat the same, maybe 10 to 12 things all the time, some lean proteins, arugula, spinach, some fruits, some protein powder. I think that many of us really don't change it up that much.
Yeah. And we always think about it as whole foods are really important. That gives you all the building blocks you can get out of that food. And especially in the fitness industry, we talk a lot about like food is your energy. What you put in your body is what is allowing you to do everything. And every piece of food you take in, you use all of it. And the better the food, the better the outcome. But the thing you just think about is when we're looking at diversity, when we want to ensure that we have a diverse gut, you only get what you feed it. So when you think about people, like when you have a bad day and you crave a certain type of food, salty food, fatty foods, and then you don't feel well the next day, and that causes you to crave that again, that's because you fed that bacteria, and then your body then
and now
craves
they're
it
hungry,
again,
right? Like
right?
sugar. They're hungry. They want more.
Yeah. And so when you think about looking at diversity, you're feeding more bacteria. So you have kind of a wider variety of things that can convert what food you're using, and create better, better fat storage, better building blocks for vitamins and things like that, because that's what your gut is doing. So you want to feed it diversely. When we talk about 50 foods, it's not like, if you eat like 6 different types of greens, that's 6 different types of food. So it's just trying to find a way to add in something. When you're at the grocery store, and if you always buy arugula, buy kale that time, that's a different food. And it's just, you can be a one-off the one day that week. And you build up to 50 foods. It's a lot to take in. But when we think about, if you're having a protein powder, if you do a vegan-based protein powder that has a mixture of greens in it, look at what's in that, because often that's a lot of different types of food that are in there. And that's a good way to add it. We talk to a lot of people, and they do a lot of casseroles, and they do a lot of for meal planning and things, so that they can add a ton of things in at once, so that they, know what they're going to get into. And it kind of cuts down on how difficult it is to add those foods in.
Yeah, I make a lot of soups, salads, and eggs where I throw a whole bunch of different things in it. It takes 5 minutes. That's the good news. I'm curious, how in depth are these microbiome tests? How long have they been on the market? Are there some that you recommend over others? And one more on this, what does the role of parasites, how does that play into these tests? Will the tests show if you have parasites? And what else are they going to tell us?
Yeah. So we don't do gut testing. We actually have a clinical study for part of what we do with using FMT with a testing company, with Viome. These testing companies are new. And they are kind of just up and coming, and they're growing in their own way of understanding, what way should we focus on the microbiome as a whole? And a lot of them do look at the gut microbiome. Some are now starting to look at oral microbiome as well. But I think that when you're looking or trying to evaluate how to choose a test like this, you want to know what they're basing it on. So the gut microbiome has a lot of variety. For every single person, it will be different. Your gut microbiome is like your fingerprint. No one's is going to be exactly like yours because genetics plays a role, as well as, a lot of things about childhood, what kind of food you ate as a kid, if you were born vaginally or by C-section, how long you were breastfed is the beginning building blocks of your gut microbiome. But then as you become an adult, what kind of food you eat, what kind of environment you're exposed to changes it. So each gut looks different. So when I'm evaluating, if I would want my gut tested, I want to ensure they're using something called big data or using AI, because what they're doing is that for every gut test they get in, that's building what they understand about the gut. And you also want to know what you want as an output. So when you're looking at, you wanted to know about parasites, like each one of these companies will give you an idea or give you an idea of what they can show you about your gut. And then you also want to know what can you do with that information. So when you're looking at a company, you want to know, what are you going to tell me about my gut, but also what are you going to tell me about how to improve my gut?
It's interesting you should mention that. I was just telling some friends a story. I'm not going to name the name of the clinic, but about 6 years ago, I went to get a brain scan at a very reputable company that's got several offices all over the country. And, they did my brain scan and then basically sent me away with a bag of their own vitamins. And that was the last I'd ever heard from them. Actually wrote them a complaint letter. So I'm hoping that my microbiome test comes back and I'm sure because of my practitioner, they're going to give me some practical advice on what next steps are. In regards to these fecal FMT, these fecal transfers, who makes the decision? Like, let's say I'm an obese person and my microbiome's just not working. And I've heard that if they transplant obese fecal matter into a thin person, that person's going to get obese. Is that true?
So that was done, most of that work's been done preclinically, so like in a lab and often in animals, but it is pretty consistent basically that for obese mice, if you take an obese mice, do FMT into a lean mice, they get some of the characteristics and they often do gain weight. There is some early work done in humans looking at basically when you're at your peak, so you are extremely healthy, eating well, exercising a lot, you store your gut microbiome. And then say you have an injury or you've gained weight or you've kind of come out, you've stopped doing those things, by taking your old gut microbiome when you were your healthiest and kind of getting that back in your body. It helps kind of reduce weight gain and reduce some of the negative effects of not doing those things and kind of gets you back to where you were. Not exactly back, but it helps shift your body back towards that healthier state. So we do know
really
that
fascinating.
Yeah. So the gut is playing this huge role in overall health, but it does, and we know it does play a role in weight management because it plays a role in fat storage and metabolism and how food is broken down. So when your gut gets unhealthy, those key functions can also get kind of thrown off the rails as well. The way that FMT is happening right now it's only approved for C. diff, C. difficile treatment, which is kind of this, it's considered to be tied to kind of hospitals or it's a gut-based bacterial infection that can kind of throw your gut off. And FMT has been shown to be about 90% effective in restoring gut health in people with C. diff. But the research is growing into looking at it within, inflammatory bowel disease and different GI issues, but also different neuropsychiatric conditions, autism, Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis are being studied, metabolic conditions. So like type 2 diabetes and obesity are being studied, cardiovascular diseases, and even its relationship to kind of helping with quality of life in patients that are going through cancer treatment. So we're learning more about it, and there are ways to access kind of information about FMT from different companies. So, you can always reach out to our company, get an understanding of kind of, where your gut is now and where you want it to be. And if FMT is a good fit, but it's an emerging area. And so it's not something you could go to your doctor, and request FMT right now. So it's specific to companies and it's often done outside the US.
I was going to ask what the leading country is right now on microbiome health, on these FMTs, and can also, like people in the US or Canada, pay out of pocket if they just wanted to get this done.
Yeah. So our company doesn't provide treatment to any Canadians. It's something we're working with that health body, and we kind of try to work with each health body in countries that we're in. We are in 4 countries. So we have treatment centers in Mexico, Hungary, Panama, and Australia. There are some in the UK as well, with other companies. So it's kind of growing, and it changes depending on as we learn more and more approvals are coming through. So there's the FDA has approved a couple of companies for C. diff treatments, and those companies are researching other areas as well. So I think in the next couple of years, we'll see it approved for more disease states. But you can reach out, like for us, you can reach out with us through our website, and we kind of work with people to figure out if FMT is a good fit. And then they can go to a treatment center and kind of go through the process of doing FMT.
So right now, if someone's residing in the US, chances are they're going to have to go over the border, much like many of the more natural holistic cancer clinics are located in Mexico. They're going to have to go to Mexico. Or if you want stem cell treatments, I think you have to go to Panama for full body stem cell. So we kind of have to leave our country to get something that's cutting edge.
Yeah. And I think it's the procedure to get something through like a governing body like the FDA, it takes a really long time. You're looking at, decades of time to get these things through, and they're very costly. I'm really hopeful for FMT because there are a lot of pharmaceutical companies in the US now doing testing, doing these clinical trials, and they're going really well. And we're seeing a growth in the number of clinical trials to kind of get FMT. So, we're up to, I think last year there were 300 clinical trials utilizing FMT for different disease states, including obesity and autism spectrum disorder and Parkinson's disease. So a wide variety of disorders are being looked at. So I think we'll see more of this, and I think it will become more readily available. But right now you're kind of finding it in countries that it fits in within their health bodies and what they're allowing to happen in each country.
And I have a friend that was diagnosed with Parkinson's recently. So this is kind of exciting for me, and I want to pass the information along. If someone has Parkinson's or some type of myelin sheath issue, ALS, MS, are they finding that these fecal transplants are helpful to those people?
Yeah, so the research right now is showing that there are improvements. There are gut health issues in people with Parkinson's, so we are seeing a shift in that, but as well as in some of the scales used for, for movement and things like that, there are improvements. There's been about 4 or 6 studies done to date, and I think there's 4 clinical trials right now, and the data right now looks really positive. And I think for me, one of the most mind-blowing things that happened many years ago, when kind of the gut-brain connection was first being talked about, was they were finding that people with Parkinson's disease consistently 10 years before they would have been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease had a very similar change in gut health issues. And they saw that almost across the board. And so that was when people started thinking about, are these kind of higher level neural disorders maybe starting somewhere else, or maybe there's signs of it earlier on. And I feel like that's where that connection of looking at the gut and Parkinson's kind of started, was seeing, this consistent trends and issues before people were diagnosed, and wondering, okay, so should we look at the gut, and maybe is that playing a role? And now we have an understanding of, the gut-brain connection, where the gut can talk to the brain can talk to the gut. And, the gut microbiome is creating neurotransmitters, which is, how the brain talks to itself. And so, when you have a dysfunctional gut, that can then downstream change how many neurotransmitters your brain has access to. So we're getting a better understanding of, how important the gut is in kind of brain-based conditions.
I have a friend that's a doctor, and he was telling me that some new research is coming out that Alzheimer's is actually some type of microbiome issue that kind of crawls from your gut into your brain. And yet my friend, Dr. Barry Sears, who was on the show last week, says that Alzheimer's is just kind of diabetes of the brain. I'm curious as to your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So the research looking at dysfunction tied to Alzheimer's disease is definitely growing. There is a lot. And I think I think it's part of a puzzle. We know very little about how Alzheimer's comes to be and why it has the trajectory that it does. But the research is showing that there's definitely a shift or change in the gut in people with Alzheimer's disease. And when we boil it down to it, as you age, your gut gets less healthy. And we know it ages with you. And when we get to an elderly state, after 65, the gut doesn't look anything like it did when it was an adult. But with that comes dysfunction. And we're seeing that people that have a healthier gut when they're older, either by, diet and exercise, actually have, less anxiety, they're less depressed, they're overall just healthier. And then when you add in having, a dysfunctional gut earlier on, and then that gets more dysfunctional as you age, it seems to be that, the microbiome has definitely changed in people with Alzheimer's disease. We just aren't sure, what part or where that part comes in. Is it the cause? Is it a consequence? Or is it part of, is it, one of the dominoes that, comes into making that disease? So it's an area that we watch regularly because we want to get an understanding of, this is such a debilitating disorder. And so it's like, okay, so where does the gut play in, and how does shifting gut health help with that? So it's definitely, I would call it something very emerging. I find I'm seeing a lot more of it in the research now. I say probably, 2 years ago, you may have seen 1 or 2 papers on it. And just last week, I think I got 4 new papers just looking at the gut and Alzheimer's. So we're getting more research and getting a better understanding of it.
I might ask you to send me some of those. As a longtime yoga practitioner and a big believer in doing a variety of different things to unify the body, the mind, and the spirit, hearing you speak, I think, is a good reminder that everything within our body mind truly is connected, from the gut to the brain, to our stress levels, to how or if we're moving our bodies, what we're putting in them. I want to jump to the brain and the gut now, because you are a neuroscientist. And so, I've struggled with depression on and off throughout my entire life, really bad PMS, like also some digestive issues. So I'm kind of wondering if you can educate us a little bit about the intersection of gut health and cognitive function, and anything else along those lines you'd like to share.
Yeah. So the first, I guess, is just so the gut-brain axis is kind of a way for these 2 systems to communicate back and forth. And it involves, your immune pathways, neural pathways, endocrine, metabolic pathways, all of them come together to kind of utilize this communication. And so what we know about these 2 is that the gut provides building blocks that are really important to the brain. So when I was talking about earlier about, neurotransmitters such as like serotonin, 90% of the serotonin in your body is made in your gut. Dopamine.
I want to just ask one question on this, because you mentioned that SSRIs can affect the microbiome. I took SSRIs years ago, and if anything, my experience was like increased digestive function, not less. Is that a consequence of SSRIs, or can they have an opposite effect?
I know one of the side effects, or something that's listed with SSRIs, or can be changed in bowel function. It's one of the secondary things, but that could be that heightened serotonin that's in your gut. So you're adding so much more in. That's where it's being processed, and you may have more than you need, and we know it changes gut health, and it's not. SSRIs are not a positive impact on the gut.
I was going to ask, changes for the better or for the worse?
Not for the better. We know that it can alter the gut in the gut microbiome as a whole, and in a negative way. So it is worth keeping track of, like, if you are taking SSRIs and you're seeing a change in your gut health, okay, so what else can I do to help my gut, kind of counteract this? Because, there are a lot of people and there's a lot of usefulness of SSRIs, but okay, so can I shift my diet to kind of feed my gut better so that I can kind of offset some of these negative effects I can see?
What was interesting when I took an SSRI is I noticed that not only did I have enhanced digestion, but my craving for carbohydrates really lessened, I guess, because I was getting the serotonin that I needed from the pill and not from, carbohydrate products.
Yeah. So complex carbohydrates play a role they contain dietary fiber, and that's one of the building blocks for different neurotransmitters as well. It's part of the long cascade within the gut to building these neurotransmitters. So, if you have more of them, then your body would crave or shift craving, because it's, there's something one of the outputs is already being fulfilled. So, and you'll see that you'll see craving shift depending on what you've eaten or how stressed you are. Your body is trying to kind of right itself in its own way, not always in the best ways. But it is, being aware of those cravings sometimes can help know what your body is trying to build or what it could be missing. But we're still understanding that diet is a very confusing thing when you look at the gut, because every single person that eats something, because you have a different gut microbiome, the output looks different. How positive that change is depends on what you were starting with and how long you need to see those changes change for every person. So I always find it frustrating because it's hard to come up with do these 5 things, because it's how healthy are you now? Okay, so maybe you only have to do 2 of these 5 things. So we're still trying to, find the best way to define how to make this the most conscious changes. But, diet and exercise are always the one that I, go with, because you'll see other changes because of
huge
those.
Advocates for diet and exercise here at Make America Healthy, as well, of course, as yoga and meditation practice. As we're looking at the microbiome and brain health for any like peak performance people that are listening to this and just really want to optimize themselves on every level, do you have any advice for our high achievers in the crowd?
Yeah, I think just being conscious of diversity in the types of exercise you do, diversity in the types of foods that you eat. There are caps on things, on change. So if you do the same type of exercise every day, your gains will decrease over time because your body becomes adjusted to it. And if you exercise a lot or you run a lot, you see that change by shifting what type of exercise you do. Or, if you do, you run 2 days a week, you do yoga 2 days a week, and you do, you alternate on the other day to something different. By shifting that, you shift the benefits, but you also shift the benefits for your brain and your gut health. It's same thing with eating foods. By adding diversity into your diet, you're feeding your brain and your gut in a diverse way, which builds, diversity within those systems. And that's what you want. You want to think about it like you want a diverse gut, because if you come up against something, you get sick, you have to take antibiotics. By having a diverse gut, you're more protected against, those moments in life where, you get sick and there's nothing you can do about it. But at least if you're set up, you have some kind of room for when you get a decrease, you can come back because you had a better building block in the beginning. I think the other thing is if you are at your peak right now and you feel really good, you can always look into banking your biome, getting the biome that you have right now stored. So if you get sick or as you age, you see that you're not getting the same benefits or you're, seeing gut issues, you can kind of, I always call it rewind. But you can kind of go back to where you were at your peak and having that ready in case you get sick or in case you have to have a surgery or something like that. And then that negatively impacts your gut or your overall health. You can then go back to when you were the healthiest. So I think that's, a way, kind of an insurance policy on your overall health. And I mean, that's something that we've just started doing at Novel Biome is like, providing the aspect of, having your own gut stored for later in case you do need it. I mean, if you feel like you're at your best or you're on your way there, then that's a good opportunity to like have something in case, you aren't able to keep up with that.
So this is like freezing your eggs or banking your blood for future reference, right?
Yeah. And you have it so you can access it at any time that you want to be able to kind of go back to that healthy state, or you see a shift in your gut, or you're having GI issues, you can then go back to when your gut was at a healthier state.
And not to get too graphic, but like, how do you
do that?
Do you have to go into a facility? Is it like a home test?
Yeah. So
how does that work? How much do you need?
Yeah. You're sent a kit. And all the bacteria is extracted from stool. So you're sent a kit. It would fit into where you normally would deposit stool. And then it gets shipped back to the company. And what they do is we purify it. So it's just down to the bacteria.
And can you eliminate the bad bacteria while you're purifying and just keep the good one in? Or is that not possible?
It's basically, it's a full sample of. And so if your gut feels healthy, if you haven't had GI issues, if you haven't had to take, antibiotics in like the last 6 months, and you've been eating a good diet, or you eat a good diet in the days leading up to that, you decide to store your gut, that gut is going to be healthier than when you feel like you need to restore your gut. So the idea is that, you have a bacterial makeup and you aren't currently sick, you don't have a chronic GI issue. And then it's purified down. And what we want to do is have as many types of, bacteria and fungi and parasites that are in there, that make up your gut microbiome. You want to have all of them because that allows for better engraftment and better building blocks to kind of bring your gut back to where it was.
So I did a parasite cleanse last year. I've actually done a couple of them. What are your thoughts on doing parasite cleanses, especially if I've traveled all over the world? I'm not always that careful when I travel because I like to try to introduce as many bacteria into my system as possible because I think it builds my immune system, which, so far so good. I am illness and free and healthy. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on doing parasite cleanses as part of microbiome health, and how would one know if they should actually do that? Or do you think it's just a good thing to do a couple of times a year?
I think it's look at symptoms. If you feel like you have, your gut isn't acting the way that it should be, or it has changed negatively, I would always recommend getting some kind of testing done to get an understanding of what could be wrong. So if you feel like you've seen a shift, if you were traveling, 3 months after you come home from a tropical, destination, you go, I just don't feel like my body's processing food the way it did before, or my gut just doesn't feel the same. Your body is very tuned to your gut, specifically if there's been a change. If you listen, I always say, listen to your gut. But honestly, listen to your gut. It's telling you, and I think it's worth getting those things tested to get an understanding, because it may not be parasites, or it may not be a negative parasite, or it may not be a negative bacteria that's in there that's made that change, but you want to get an understanding of it.
So can there be any harm for taking a parasite cleanse if you, in fact, don't have parasites?
I think it would depend on how you do it. So I've seen people do them where, then they, don't eat for a couple of days and they only live off, specific liquid-based diets to do these cleanses. We have to think, what's the negative impacts of taking away all those other foods? And with the gut shifting so quickly with diet, is being aware of, are there any negative impacts to what I'm taking away from my diet at this time? And so that's why I always say, look into it, look at where you've been, and if you could have gotten something before you make a change, and even when it's short term, being aware of those. But the research on it, I couldn't give you a definitive answer because I try to stay away from parasite research as much as possible. It's outside of my scope. But I think it's just understanding what the long-term impacts of those changes you make and what kind of things. If you're adding things in your body that aren't negative for your body to do the cleanse, it's not going to do anything negative. Just being aware of what's going in and what other changes could happen because of it. I will, though, say you were talking about traveling and kind of expanding it. That's a whole new area of research, this idea of rewilding your gut. We live in a very industrialized nation and countries right now, and that's shifted our gut microbiome in somewhat of a negative way. And so this idea now of traveling experience, getting outside, getting your hands dirty, eating vegetables with the skin still on, to try to expose yourself more.
And eating dirt. I have a friend who's very well known in the health and wellness industry, who's an advocate of eating dirt. I mean, obviously you need to be careful where you're eating this dirt from. Eating soil, I guess I should say. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think it's exposure to bacteria and microbes. At our house, we try to eat as much locally as we can. We live in Canada, and it's cold.
You've got great produce in Canada, though.
Yeah, but not everything grows here
in BC. Yeah.
But not everything grows here. So, in the winter time, if we have strawberries, I would wash them. And if I eat, if I'm getting something from a grocery store that I think, could have come in contact with pesticides, we wash them. But, if we're eating root vegetables, I never take the skins off. That's one easy way to get an exposure to some microbes, some dirt. But you want an exposure to different environments.
Unless you're buying stuff from the US, in which case it was probably sprayed with some glyphosate before harvest.
Yeah. And so we try to eat, I live in Southern Alberta. So there's lots of farms, lots of, potatoes and carrots are
Right.
our friend. And so we try to eat at that as much as possible, washing them and leaving, washing your vegetables, but leaving the skins on is a good way. That does, it enhances your exposure. But as well as going outside, if you're traveling, going outside barefoot, walk through the grass, and get your body connected to the environment, and exposure to those microbes do make a difference. And we're learning more and more about the importance of that, and kind of, getting not everything being clean and not everything being, overly processed.
In a world of gloves and hand sanitizer right now.
I know we were making moves on not using hand sanitizer for everything. And we've come back around, and I mean, rightfully so, it was necessary, but I feel like it's going to be a couple of years before we stop relying on it so heavily. And we do know there were negative impacts, 5-10 years ago, to our reliance on hand sanitizers. So, it can wipe out. So I think we'll see a shift back in that, but it has heightened our understanding of, the need for exposures and getting more microbes in your life, because you kind of have to offset those things.
So if someone moves to another country, let's say I went and lived in the Amazon for 3 months, is my personal microbiome going to be completely shifted, partially shifted? How does that work?
Yeah. I'll go the other way, because I read a really interesting study maybe 2 or 3 days ago, but it was looking at people who came from non-developed countries to a developed country like the US. And they found within 6 months, their diet looked more, their gut microbiome looked more similar to someone who lived in the US than their home country. And most of that driving force was environmental changes as well as dietary changes. So I think if you move somewhere new and you eat the foods that are local there and eat the food that is local there, you'll see more of a shift in your gut microbiome than, if you move somewhere but then kept eating, westernized food, you'll see less of a shift. And if you don't get out and explore,
how quickly will these shifts happen?
You can see in this one study, they saw almost a complete shift within 6 months. Now, of course, they weren't looking every month. I think they looked at like 1 month, 3 months, 6 months. And by 6 months, it was completely shifted. We know based solely on diet, within 24 hours, you start seeing changes. And I think it's within 3 months, as long as that change has been consistent, you see kind of a complete shift and change in the gut microbiome.
And would you also recommend that people get food allergy tests? Like if I was lactose intolerant, didn't know and continue to eat like yogurt and sour cream, would I be negatively affecting my microbiome?
I think if you have an allergy that is gut, so something like lactose intolerant is a lack of bacteria in the gut. And by consistently adding those things in, you can strain your gut. I would always, as someone who has some severe food allergies, I think it's worthwhile. I think when you have an understanding of foods that your body can't properly process and you take those out, the change you see in your overall gut health, but also your mood, are huge. And so getting an understanding of what stresses your gut, and that's one of the positives to getting these gut testing done or food allergy testing done, is you get a better understanding of what your body is or is not capable of at that moment, and how to make changes to optimize, the body you have to make it a better version. So, food testing is a big one, because I think what we don't understand is when you feel really terrible, but you feel really terrible all the time, you no longer remember you feel really terrible. You shift your expectations of what good looks like, because you live in, if you live in chronic discomfort in your gut, but you've lived it that way for years, you don't actually know what it is to not feel that way. So you redefine it.
And it's the same thing with like exercise or practicing yoga, where people will get away from it and they don't remember how good it made them feel, because for some reason they didn't anchor themselves in that.
Well, your brain almost has to. If you feel bad, your brain has to, you can't think about feeling uncomfortable or bad all the time. So it's almost a protective mechanism. But one thing from personal experience, I have a fairly severe bovine allergy, so no dairy, no beef, or anything like that. And when I got to, my early 20s, I was like, I'm at my peak. I'm doing my best. I'm like in my 20s, everything is great. And then I met my now husband, and he was like, you need to take, your allergies really seriously. So he became really aware, that probably came in contact with something. Maybe we shouldn't do that. And within a couple of months, I was like, oh, I feel like 100% better than I did. I thought I was like at my peak, but now I'm sleeping better. When I wake up from sleeping, I have more energy because my body isn't trying to fight itself. And so you start to feel better. And so that's that understanding of what building blocks you have and how to improve it is when you're taxing your body, when everything you eat, if part of that is not, your body isn't able to break it down, you're taxing your body. Part of the energy you're getting from the food is being used to fight itself because it can't do what it's supposed to. And so when you take those things away, the benefits you get, just boost in mood and energy, can be huge because your body's not fighting itself as much as it was the day before. And you keep getting those benefits. And when that changes, your stress levels go down because you feel better. And that's kind of the part of takeaway from the gut microbiome, is that it's your whole body is interconnected. Your heart is not independent from your gut. Your gut is not independent from your brain. So changing one thing, like changing the food that you eat, can have a cascade of events on your whole body. And when you make that change, you may find that there's another change you can make that will set off another cascade, because everything is interconnected. And I think that's something we're seeing a shift in from traditional medicine, is originally it was everything was independent. Your brain is independent, your heart is independent. And now we're coming to understand, like, well, clearly everything is connected. If you think of nothing else, like your blood touches everything. So clearly everything is at minimum connected by that. And that shift in thinking has shifted, I think, our appreciation of each individual unit affecting all of the other parts of your body. And I think for me, eye-opening was like cardiovascular health and gut health are very connected. And now that I know about it, I'm like, that completely makes sense. But at the time, it was like, I would have never thought my gut, my heart would impact each other, but they do. And so we're learning more and more about that. And I think we're getting a better understanding of how important each thing is, but how it's important to everything else and your overall health. And so we talk more and less about just gut health and more about overall wellness, because changing your gut health changes your overall wellness as well.
Wonderful. We're going to leave it there. I wish this show was 2 hours because I have 1,000 other questions to ask you. So we'll probably have to have you back on. Where can our listeners find out more about you and the company that you represent?
Yeah, so we're all over social media. So if you just look up Novel Biome, you'll find us as well. We have an educational YouTube series that we do that deep dives into different topics about the gut microbiome and its effects on aging and its effects on the brain. So we release a video every week. So if you want to learn more about it, you can go there. And you can go to our website, which is novelbiome.com. And you can connect with someone on our team if you have questions about gut health or how to utilize FMT. That's a good way to contact us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This has been such an educational show. If you're listening, please share this show with others if you enjoyed it. Take care of your microbiome, take care of your health, clean up your diet, get moving, all that good stuff. We would like to thank our show sponsors, YogaFit Training Systems Worldwide, the leader in yoga, mind, body education. You can visit YogaFit online at yogafit.com for live virtual trainings, in-person trainings, educational sessions, conferences. We're also having a YogaFit retreat in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, April 28th through the 30th. And if you're interested, we have a couple of spaces left. You can message Kim at yogafit.com. Please find me on social media, on Instagram at Beth Shaw Health. You can find all of my books anywhere books are sold, including Amazon. And if you'd like to send me a private message or visit me online, you can go to bethshaw.com. Thank you so much, Dr. Cahill. This has been a great show, and we hope to see you soon. Namaste, everybody. Stay healthy. Have a beautiful day. Thank you.
Thanks.
All clear. Great job today, everyone.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm interested in some of the services your company provides. So I'm going to get your email from my assistant and I'll reach out.
Perfect. Thank you so much. This was great. This was very good.
Great.
I feel very relaxed. Sometimes these I get like they're very stressful. This was very relaxing. I appreciate
Try to keep the yoga vibe going. Yeah, definitely email me, beth@yogafit.com, and then I'll connect with your company. And if you guys want to share the show on all of your social media platforms, that would also be awesome.
Yes. If you can send me, if you guys, the recording of this, our media wizard can put it on our YouTube channel as well.
I definitely will do that as soon as the show is over. Okay. Thank you so much.
No problem. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.